You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And as usual, on Monday nights, we are your hosts for this show. So, hey, Peter Griffin's back. I got to put this up. Yeah, we haven't seen you in a while. He says, cheers head to head. Well, cheers right back to you. Glad you can join us.
Cheers.
It's always good when, some of our longtime viewers are able to be there. Ronaldo. Dude, It's been forever. It's just kind of like
There's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
I know. It's funny because we have a lot of new subscribers. So automatically, I think people are going to think the only people that are watching us are our friends. But as you guys know, Dave Filoni has gotten promoted again. Yet again. Like, just when we were getting used to his last promotion, right? I remember we did a whole show trying to figure out what that even meant. It used to be like creative director or something, right? And we're like, well, what is that exactly? So
yeah,
we just got used to that. And now all of a sudden he is now, what is it? Chief Creative Officer. That just sounds like one of those made up, hey, we can't give you a raise, so we're going to give you this really cool new title. But you know what? A lot comes with that, though. I mean, there is a lot of weight to this. This is real, and what we are going to pretty much discuss tonight is, one, is this a good idea? Is he the right person to do this? And then, of course, we're going to talk about maybe what this might mean for the franchise going forward. How is he going to interact with Kathleen Kennedy? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we can really go into with this and maybe think about not just how it affects the franchise as a whole, but maybe how project to project it might affect it. And, again, I mean, look, let's be honest. Filoni and Favreau have pretty much cornered the whole television universe as far as Star Wars goes. So, I mean, really, I don't actually think it's going to affect it that much. I mean, what do you think?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty much going to be. I mean, as far as I've read, it's everything that they've unleashed or revealed at Celebration is still on track.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing. Also, Peter basically says been crazy the last month of the holidays, traveling, etc. Tell me about it, man. Dragonfly Mask, of course, is with us. Says hello, everybody.
What's up, brother?
Yeah, what's going on? So, I think, and then let's see, Ronaldo. Okay, so Ronaldo's kicking it off. So now we have dispensed with the pleasantries, as Vader would say. And we're moving it. Oh, and by the way, as an experiment, let me just get this out of the way, and then we'll get into this. As an experiment, not only are we on YouTube, as usual, that's our home. Not only are we on Twitch, what's up, everybody on Twitch, but theoretically right now, we're actually streaming to Twitter. Or X, as it's called. Now, I don't know if I could bring in the chats for that yet, because this is sort of like a last-minute thing. I'm sort of doing a test, so if you're watching on Twitter, tweet something. I'm sure I'll see it, right? I got our Twitter page open, or our X page. I gotta get used to saying that. But, let's see. So Ronaldo says, is it a good idea? I'll say yes. Very good news, but I do have some concerns, little ones. Well, we want to know what those concerns are.
Yeah, definitely let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Dom comes in, says, congrats on 6K.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being a part of that, Dom.
Yes. Absolutely. I know, it's amazing, right? This channel has just grown like exponentially. It would be nice, though, if you guys are watching this and you are new subscribers, watch some of the videos, right? Like, watch them for a little while. Like, even have them on in the background, to be honest. I mean, I don't usually say this, but even if you're not at all really watching, you're just kind of listening in the background, like one of our viewers, Chad, for instance. Chad does that a lot. He'll have it on the background while he's doing stuff, and then he'll chat in every once in a while. Or maybe he'll chat in every once. Okay, I don't want to lose viewers. So,
Yes, please.
just this is kind of like our little pitch to you guys, right? I'll spare you the whole like and subscribe. I mean, obviously we want you to do that. People have been subscribing. That's good. Now we just need you to watch the content. And of course, Ronaldo says congrats. But let's actually take it from Ronaldo's point of view for a second. He says that he has some concerns. I'm sure he's going to tweet them in. I'm stuck on this Twitter thing. He's going to chat them in. Do you have any concerns about Filoni now being involved? Because first of all, tell everybody what this new thing entails. Like, what does this title mean? And then let me know if you have any concerns on it.
So, chief creative officer basically means that he's not telling people what to do, but he's more or less providing resources for a lot of storytellers, whether depending on what medium they're going in. So he's over all the creative, essentially. So whether that's books, that's over video games, that's over comics, that's over television shows, that's over movies. He's the guy. He's the I guess the more or less a guy who greenlights, say, hey, yeah, that's good. Hey, that's cool. I mean, he's not telling them what to do, but he's more or less guiding them in the ways of like where they should kind of go in a sense. That's his description of it.
That's right. He is slowly, as seen here, becoming pretty much the king of content at a lot of Disney's. Because again, it should be pointed out that this is across Lucasfilm, right? So this doesn't just include Star Wars. This would theoretically include any further Indiana Jones projects or anything that Lucasfilm itself produces.
Mm-hmm.
What about concerns, though?
Concerns? I think that my thing is if you're going to what are you keeping? What are we getting rid of? So that's one of them.
Hopefully, Kathleen Kennedy is what we're getting rid of.
Unfortunately, no.
No,
as it stands right now, Kathleen Kennedy is still present. But what I mean, as far as like story wise, right? So we know that he's notorious from picking things from legends and bringing them into new canon and whatnot. So I'm curious to see what he brings in, what he doesn't bring in. And then I guess, like I said, just moving forward, just now we could kind of almost. I don't know if we can actually hold him responsible, but in a way we can for anything that's upcoming. Because before he was kind of more like the consultant in a way, if I could use that terminology, when it came to a lot of different things. But now he's the chief officer of it. So it seems like he has more of an authority where he can say, like, yes, you can do that. Yes. Almost like how Pablo Hidalgo, and I don't even know if he's still in the equation as well, but he was kind of one of the main gatekeepers. So I don't know if he's still with Lucasfilm, Disney, or if he's moved on to something else.
That's a good question because we haven't heard from him. It has been weird that, because like you said, he used to be one of the guys on the story group, and there was who was that one lady? There was some lady who was appointed like the head of, it was almost like when they did Filoni's creative director thing. She was like the head of something else that seemed like the story group would have fallen in her hands. But I'm not sure though. Because Pablo he was a guy, man. He was the guy. But here's the thing. He got into a big fight with Star Wars Theory. He had said, which of course is probably the most successful YouTube channel, Star Wars YouTube channel anyway, ever. I mean, short of the official one. But he got into... No, of course. We're on our way. But here's the thing. He got into a little bit of trouble with some of the viewers or whatever, and then suddenly he was just taken out. And you almost have to wonder whether he's still there and he just has a reduced presence, or whether he's not there. How has that actually affected a lot of the franchise? Because that's a good point, man. I mean, we really don't know. And of course, obviously, you'd actually have to have Disney's whole multiverse, in order to figure it out, because you would actually have to know, well, I mean, what could have happened, or what was, in other words, what was Pablo doing or not doing that might have either been detrimental or, on the other side, maybe positive for Disney, that influence is no longer there. Like you said, maybe he is there. It's just a reduced role. If anybody out there knows if Pablo Hidalgo is still in the Star Wars story group, put it in the chats for me, or comments if you're watching afterwards. Oh, David joins us, by the way.
Oh, what's going on, man?
I just saw that out of the corner of my eye.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, So that's one of the big things that I'm concerned with. Just where is he going with the stories, and is he going to be able to keep up with everything? Like there's there's a lot of stuff that you have to do, and and try to manage. Like I said, you got the video games, you have books, you have comics, you have movies, TV show episodes, or I won't say TV show, but like series episodes. And then of course, like the films. So then it's like, if with him doing that, also, does that mean that is he giving up directing now? Because that's a big job. So do you have time to do that and direct The Mandalorian? Because he was directing a lot of stuff with Favreau and other. I mean, granted, maybe because they have a core group of directors now, like Deborah Chow and Bryce Dallas Howard and Rick Fumaye. I think that's how you pronounce his name, but
Fumaye or something like that. But you know what?
But like, I don't know if they create that stable so that way he can just focus on the creative side of things and let those guys and ladies write their stories and direct their episodes or whatnot. So those are some of my concerns just on the onset of all this.
Well, here's the problem that I have, and this is basically jumping off, because those are really the only concerns that I have. I mean, as far as story direction and stuff like that, I don't really think that that's going to be a problem, although, as you alluded on our last show, I think it was a Thanksgiving show, when we started talking about that we were going to discuss this tonight, and, we gave a little bit of a preview. Unfortunately, Dave couldn't join us for this one, guys. If anybody remembered, we were trying to get him on this too, because this is a really big topic. But I think one of the issues, and this is what you brought up, is that when I said, hey, do you think this is a good idea? Let's give our audience a little bit of a preview on what we're going to talk about. You were kind of just like right out the gate. You were like, well, if you had asked me that a year ago, I would have been all on board, no questions asked. But, after Ahsoka, I don't know. And there's something to be said for that, man. That's one. And going along with that, the idea was they were supposed to be grooming him to do his film eventually, right? If he wanted to direct it, he has to get better at directing. I mean, he's good with animation. We all know that. But live action is a different animal, and you have to work toward that. You have to improve. It's not like he sucks, but he definitely needs to improve.
Or maybe that's why they put him where they are putting him, because let directors direct because it seems like in a way he's kind of moved more into that. I mean, because we always call him the heir apparent of George Lucas. Well, let's just face it, George Lucas isn't the greatest director.
Well, that's exactly.
He's a great storyteller. You know what I mean? So
basically move him to where he would be the best.
Where his strengths can be magnified, and then you allow directors who really are directors to really bring this stuff to life. And so then that way you have, you don't have the elbow trying to do the work of the fingers, shall we say.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Let me get some of these chats in here. Peter Griffin basically says, everyone's favorite, Kathleen Kennedy, is over 70. Is she really over 70? I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, she's well preserved like the Emperor. We all know where this is going. Well,
it's carbonite freezing.
There you go. That still blows my mind. She's actually over 70. All right.
No, she is actually just 70.
Oh, she is 70?
Yeah, she's
still. I didn't think she was 70.
Yeah, no.
Although when you really stop and think about it, she's been in the business a long time, so But
Mm-hmm.
but to that point though, this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning of the show, that it does, even though I don't think that it hurt, at least I don't think, after that South Park, into the Panderverse thing, I'm not so sure, but
I still gotta watch that.
oh man, it's brutal. But she's definitely been, I guess, in the sights. Like I don't think she's been in really like a big danger. Yes, I've lost my ability to talk, which is great when you're hosting a show. But I think the big problem is that they do need to think, especially if she is 70 years old, they have to start thinking about the future. As David might appreciate Eckhart, think about the future, right? So, I mean, you do have to think about things like that. You have to think about your next step, because this is a franchise that isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. Although, if they keep running it into the ground,
yeah, it might.
I mean, maybe Filoni won't have a chance to take it over. But I think that, at least their plans anyway, this franchise is going to go for a long, long time. And so you have to start thinking, and more importantly, another thing that they haven't been very good at doing, preparing. You have to prepare. So if you are basically prepping Filoni to take over that role, although, again, it's different to being a studio head than it is being a creative director, or, in that creative side of things. And I actually think that it would be somewhat of a disservice if Filoni were a studio head. I'm not saying he couldn't do the job. He might be able to. But on one hand, I could see it, because then you have somebody who's definitely protecting everything, and you wouldn't have to worry about as much. And then Filoni can become the new Lucas, and then somebody else could become the new Filoni, and then you can carry it on from there. But I don't know. I know this is going to be controversial to say. It almost might not even be a bad idea to let Lucas be like an interim studio head to write Star Wars back and get it to where it needs to be, and then hand it off.
Well, I mean, I think we've already kind of done that in a way. I mean, I think that was kind of the point of Filoni being up under him for so long and really doing that. I think that's but I think it's just one of those things where you have to kind of get used to the reins truly being in your hands. And, there's a certain learning curve to it, especially like when you're dealing with, and we mention this all the time, when you're dealing with someone else's baby.
Yeah.
It's like someone
absolutely
entrusts you with the custody of their child, and it's like, okay, it doesn't necessarily have any of your DNA necessarily per se in it. So it's like now you're trying to mold something that you didn't create. And it's almost like being, some people say like being a step parent or something like that. It's like, all right, well, I didn't have any hand in making this, but I'm still a part of their process. And I think,
so you're saying Kathleen Kennedy, she's like the wicked stepmother of the of this whole story, basically? Is that what you're trying not to say, maybe?
Well, I'm just saying that I think she means well. I just think she's just going about it the wrong way. I think she wants Star Wars to be great. I think she wants it to, and she's trying to push it forward. She just doesn't really understand it to the degree that she needs to in order to make that happen. And she's letting her own biases, get in the way of that. And I think that's just, and that's a common thing, especially when you're ultimately responsible. You kind of want your influence into it. And unfortunately, it's not so much, it's almost like when a parent, once again, use another parent metaphor. It's like when a parent is trying to live vicariously through their children or something like that. Like you're trying to put what you want your child to be instead of allowing your child to develop and be what they're supposed to be. And I think that's, instead of just providing them the foundation to keep growing, you're trying to put too much of what you want them to be. So that's kind of how I look at it.
All right. Well, Ted Ted Adam Green does have a comment, but not yet. Dragonfly says, as of 2022, he is still listed as creative executive and Star Wars lore advisor.
Yeah, I was talking about Pablo Hidalgo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, again, a lot can happen in a year, though, because I think that might have been before.
Well, I just looked them up a little bit, and they still have them listed as like a creative executive. We're currently working on Lucasfilm on the Star Wars franchise.
Honestly, I think they just censured him. Because he used to be the one that was answering all the questions, on Twitter, now X. He used to be pretty heavy with the social media stuff, and you haven't heard a peep out of that guy. Ted Adam Green, of course, it says, been looking forward to this one, guys. Yeah, we have too, actually, because this is, like I said, this is a big topic that pretty much came out of nowhere.
A lot of parts.
And a lot of parts.
It has a lot of moving parts to this, because there's not just... So a lot of this is coming from... So I sent Eric this, a couple of articles. One article just announced that Filoni was becoming, the chief creative officer for Lucasfilm, which Eric also pointed out too, that includes Indiana Jones as well. However, there was another article, and if you guys want to check it out on your own and read it full scale, it's in Vanity Fair. And Vanity Fair magazine kind of not only just announced about what Filoni's new position is, but they've also covered like a lot of things as far as they discussed Ahsoka and then also the future of Star Wars and where a lot of the stuff is going, especially the things that's going to be under his purview. So that's where our conversation tonight is hinged upon, is really just, okay, with Filoni becoming more or less the guy creatively, what does that mean for the future of Star Wars? Because we still have several projects that are coming out. Of course, upcoming, we still have Skeleton Crew. That's pretty much already done already. That's the next series that's going to be released.
Yeah, dude, and honestly, I don't even remember when it's coming out.
Early part of 24.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's nothing else for 23, right? There's nothing coming out in December, is there?
Not to my knowledge, because but we still have like the Acolyte that's still coming up. So I think Acolyte and Skeleton Crew are slated for 24.
Well, for that matter, so is Andor Season 2. Something else in there, too. Maybe it was one of the... They're doing another Bad Batch, I would assume.
It was supposed to be. I don't know if it's being held off right now. Not entirely sure on that, because like I said, they announced themselves like, oh yeah, we're doing it, but then things keep getting shifted around, especially after the writer strike and everything, like so.
Well, yeah,
things are kind of jumbled up, in that regard as well.
Mandalorian Season 4, though, that's got to be coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
No, that's definitely. I've saw articles about that. It's coming.
It doesn't mean anything.
Well, it's supposed to be replacing another show that they were doing. That's why I was bringing it up. Is because it's supposed to replace another Star Wars show that I think got either canceled or moved to the back burner or something like that. So, but
we'll
yeah,
see,
so that's what I'm
saying. I know Donald Glover
on.
and is it his brother? Are they the ones that are writing Lando? Yeah, so I mean, that's still...
Yeah.
All right, well, Ronaldo says, I think Dave will obviously think of what would George do, which is a great thing. But I hope that doesn't mean that other creators can't bring a fresh new take on Star Wars. And that's actually a really good point, too, because, number one, Filoni could be very persuasive. Daryl, you brought up the fact that he had basically said, look, I'm not trying to tell these people what to do or basically micromanage. But in a lot of ways, though, him being so persuasive, he could end up making them do what he wants them to do, and they could think it's their idea. I mean...
A little Jedi mind trick?
A little bit, because he's just really good at that. He gets you... I mean, it's funny. Every time I see an interview with him, I'm just so fired up about it, I want to go out and make a Star Wars movie myself. So, I mean, and of course, that feeling has not subsided as each of the, the projects have been released. But I mean, that's a good quality in a leader to have that sort of inspirational leadership thing going. But at the same time, it could also be detrimental because, as Ronaldo points out, I mean, that could actually start to put people more into this like particular framework. And then he gets a little bit persnickety about letting people basically branch out. But on the other hand, I think right now it might be necessary to keep things a little bit boxed in because Rian Johnson tried to branch out a little bit and look what happened. You have to be very careful about how you actually bring in fresh ideas and branch out a little bit.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, and part of that. So here's the kind of I don't want to say like the starting lineup, but like here's kind of like the head honchos of a lot of things. So we have Kathleen Kennedy, who's still the creative director. I mean, who's still the studio head over Lucasfilm at current. Okay, we have Dave Filoni, who is chief creative director or chief creative officer. And then you have Carrie Beck. Carrie Beck is vice president of live action development and production.
That's the one I was thinking of.
So she oversees all animated and all live action series development on behalf of Lucasfilm. So that's her wheelhouse. So she's kind of, and therein lies the problem, because I want to say, let's say a problem. It could be a problem. Is that if they really don't understand what Star Wars is to the degree that Filoni does, and understand it to really make it a state, to really make it stay true to its principles, if you will, and not try to, once again, and I think that may be part of the reason why we're seeing all this this propaganda or this agenda movement that we're getting a lot of times in Star Wars, is because sometimes, like I said, people have their bias and they want to put that into their art, into their work. And it's like, sometimes that's okay depending on what it is. But then there's other things such as Star Wars where, yeah, that doesn't really belong. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse on that, because I know we talk about that, almost ad nauseum.
No, but here's a good point though. I just want to ride off of that for a second. The other thing that it is, besides what you just mentioned, it's also the easiest thing to do, right? If you could just take things that are happening in society and then just put them into any story, it practically writes itself at that point. It's almost like Law and Order in that sense, right? Like, I mean, not disparaging. It's one of my favorite shows of all time, but they're getting stuff from the current headlines. And in a lot of cases, they're just fictionalizing the current headlines. And it's so important from a storytelling perspective. Number one, if you want to keep Star Wars timeless, you have to keep all of the, the current events, the social agendas, all that stuff has to stay out. Because as soon as you put any of that in, and this, I'm not even just talking about here in 2023. I mean, if Lucas had done that back in 1977, it would have been the same problem. Now, he did have some allegories for stuff, right? Like he sort of modeled the Empire after the Nazis, and there was, of course, the whole Ewok Empire battle that was somewhat allegorical of the Vietnam War. So there were things in there, but he was using them more for influence, not for commentary. And that's an important distinction. And so I think that when they do try to shoehorn in all these biases, agendas, current events, period, they run the risk of losing the timelessness of Star Wars. And I think a lot of that is, sure, there's some of it where they, like you said, the filmmakers just want to, hey, I want to make a point, I'm going to make it with this. But I think the other side of that is sometimes people just do it because it's easy writing.
Yeah, definitely, and that's the trap. Unfortunately, is staying away from that because, like you said, it's the low hanging fruit. It's really just you can just walk right up to it and just boom, and it really doesn't take much thought, and that's where Star Wars needs to stay away from because now you're going to further alienate and lose fans when things are done that way. There's some other things. Of course, in this article, they also talked about Ahsoka, and he made mention about some key things in the series, and what kind of spawned Ahsoka. Essentially, was because he wanted Ahsoka to basically tell the story of like the aftermath of what happened to Ahsoka after she found out that Vader was Anakin, and that's why she was so. Part of the reason why she was so despondent, or as David would say, not looks like she doesn't want to come to work, um, is because she's basically trying to like, okay, Anakin is pretty much the source of who she is in a way. He's basically taught her everything that she knows, and he was the one that was closest to her, and vice versa. So when to see that he left and went to the dark side and gave into that and became this monster, it's like, okay, well, here's this guy who's arguably like the greatest Jedi ever, and he was my master. And if he could fall, like I'm scared to train anyone else. I'm scared to because I'm going to give them what he gave me, and we see what happened to him.
Yeah, it'd be like
And
if
yeah,
you had like a pastor or preacher and they became a Satanist.
basically.
You'd be like, oh, all right, well, and it's like you said, not only that, but Anakin in a lot of ways was almost like a father, older brother figure to her too, So you also,
hmm
besides that, like you're saying, all the lessons, all the thing, everything that, and then he becomes a monster and it sort of puts a lot of that into question. There's also the personal relationship there too, you know?
Yeah, and she had this whole idealized vision of who Anakin was, and also the Jedi Order. So we also know if you watch the Clone Wars, she got she was kind of exiled from the Jedi Order, and then they tried to bring her back, but then after that point, she was like, "No, I'm good on my own now. Like, you know what? I don't want any part of this." And she walked away from it because it was just like,
It's the best scene of
wow,
the
like
Clone
this is
Wars, man.
yeah, it was just like, but it was like one of the most, and even like that interaction she had with Anakin, like right before she left, like,
Mhm.
I'll just take what you taught me and I'll be fine. I'll survive. And, it hurt Anakin too, because it's like, once again, that's another piece of him that's being stripped away. He's already having conflicted views of what the Jedi were asking him to do in regards to Palpatine. Um, you know, there were some missions that they had on, like when they lied to him about Obi-Wan when he went undercover. Now you have Ahsoka who was being accused of,
Yep.
you know, this terrorist act essentially. And then now, so it was just a lot of things that were going on. And it's like he really didn't know who to trust. And once again, that was one of the brilliant things about Palpatine. His whole plan was like he unraveled the whole Jedi Order, like what they believed, their core values. He made them uh he put them under a microscope essentially. And he's like,
Yes.
okay, how true are you to your own beliefs? Are you willing? It's almost like the Joker said in The Dark Knight. He was like, you introduce a little bit of anarchy into things, and you watch people who you thought were so noble, so good, so pure. You introduce a little bit of anarchy into that, you see they become different types of people. And that's exactly what happened.
Foregoing the
And
Star Trek references and putting in Batman today.
well, David has Fast and
Yeah,
Furious.
I
I have
guess
to
so. I mean, this is, hey, if you're a Batman fan, this is the time to tune in, I guess.
admit. But so and this is basically like when we're looking at Ahsoka, it's just like how is she dealing with Anakin's fall from grace, and how did she forgive him? And that's kind of like why in the whole world between world scene, she was like, well, I didn't expect to see you. And he was like, she was kind of like smug about it, like, oh, what do you have to teach me? Because it's like, dude, you went to the dark side.
I
What do you
often
mean?
wonder, when at the end of Return of the Jedi, when Luke's looking off and see Yoda, you see Obi-Wan, and Anakin kind of pops up, and you almost wonder,
Hmm.
do they have like Yoda and Obi-Wan going, really? How on earth did you get here? He's got to be the last. I mean, it would have been so great, if there had been a little bit of shock, like, okay, well, in front of Luke, we're gonna play this off and be all happy and cool. But as soon as we all disappear back into Force Ghostland, we're having a talk.
Yeah. Like, dude, what happened? Like,
Keep it together
Anakin
in
just
front of the
comes in.
kids, right?
Like, Anakin just comes out like, look, guys, I'm sorry. I know.
Yeah.
He also talks about further into that whole episode. He said, I think when they have that whole conversation, he said, I think the episode provides a few really good clues, but it doesn't spell it out for you. Filoni prefers to leave the mystery open to interpretation, but he defers to Lucas as the definitive storyteller on Vader. For him, this show is about Anakin's character, how Ahsoka's character dealt with her past, rather than continuing the cautionary tale of Anakin Skywalker as the Force goes. My feeling about Anakin is that George resolved everything about Anakin. I don't think I have anything to do there. I'm not trying to add, I'm not trying to add anything to that. Everything Anakin is evolved with is about her. It's about her point of view on Anakin. It's about what Anakin taught her, and if there's more of an Obi-Wan role. So he's there as more of an Obi-Wan role that we saw in the old movies. So,
I can
that's
see
kind of
that. I mean,
where, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
that might be good. And honestly, if he is in that role, then maybe he will have time to do this stuff. Because again, one of the concerns that us and some of our viewers have had is
Hmm.
he spreading himself too thin? Is he going to be able to take the time to direct a film? Is he going to be able to, still run some of the animated shows or continuing on with The Mandalorian or Ahsoka season 2? I mean, there's a lot of considerations to this, so you have to think about that. Let me get to some of these chats. So Ronaldo says, we all know that Dave is really into the cartoonish, goofy side of Star Wars, and we could see that reflected in the shows he's worked on. Well, I mean, to be fair, so is Lucas.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hence Jar Jar Binks.
I was going to say the whole Banther Poodoo line and all that stuff. I mean, there's a definite... The problem is, Lucas ended up creating this really timeless, like, whole franchise, essentially, that can appeal to all ages. But the problem is, one of the things that he does sometimes, not always, because one of the things that made A New Hope so great was he was actually quoted as saying, yeah, I made Star Wars for children, but sometimes people don't give children enough credit. They try to dumb down the material when kids can actually get a lot more than what people think. And I'm like, okay, well, that's why the original trilogy is so amazing. And then it's almost like he goes senile on us, and then he gives us Jar Jar and all this slapstick stuff, and I think that's just what he likes. But yeah, it was a little crazy. Ronaldo goes on to say, and I fear that things like Andor, which is something George never would have done, won't have a place in this franchise. Well, I think that would be more of a concern if he were president, because like you just said, he's really going to take more of an Obi-Wan role or whatever. But if it's something like Andor, he might give his 2 cents. I don't think he's going to really stop anything. I don't think that we have to worry about him necessarily putting the brakes on something. First of all, he couldn't override Kathleen Kennedy anyway. I mean, if she wants Andor is going to happen. He will then have the choice, for lack of a better term, to either give a little bit of advice or suggestions or whatever, or maybe back off and go, you know what, these guys are doing okay. This really isn't my kind of thing. But don't necessarily be so sure, though, because there was a lot of dark moments in the Clone Wars as well as Rebels. I mean, even Ahsoka to a degree. Definitely The Mandalorian. I mean, I think that Filoni could handle it. Maybe he wouldn't necessarily create something like that, but I don't necessarily think that he would be like, okay, we're only going to do this style now. We're not going to explore anything else in Star Wars. He just might not personally involve himself. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, with Filoni, it's like I said, I know he has that uphill battle dealing with Kathleen Kennedy, and that's where I'm just going to see the most problem is because, when, the boss is basically like, this is what I want, basically almost like make it happen. Eric and I know that phrase all too well. It's one of those things like, okay, well, how do I make this happen, but at the same time preserve the integrity of something? And therein lies the biggest problem I see in Star Wars, Star Wars right now is trying to give people, especially your superiors, what they want, especially when you're not the be all end all guy. You're working for someone. And so see, Lucas, he was sovereign to himself. So he never had to check with anybody else except for himself. Because everything came out of him. This whole thing is from him anyway.
Yes.
But
however,
now that...
Well, the thing is, though, I do see a little bit of behind-the-scenes stuff going on here. I do not think that there is an accident that he's being promoted to this position around the time that Disney is losing money to the point where there's rumors that they're going to be sold off to somebody because they've lost so much money and they've lost the way. There's a heavy backlash against the new Snow White to the point to where there's a rival studio making a Snow White movie. People are up in arms just about the whole woke agenda thing in Star Wars and in Disney, period. And this is what makes Into the
Marvel's
Panderverse
in trouble too.
Yes, they are. But I think Marvel, though, although they're in trouble, I think that's contributing to it. But I think the problem that Marvel is having right now is just fatigue. I think people are just having superhero comic book movie fatigue. And they're not, if you look at the stuff that they were doing in the beginning versus what they're doing now, other than Loki season 2. Now, I haven't seen it yet, but season 1 was amazing. I've heard that season 2 is incredible. So there's pockets here and there, right? People will go, okay, well, this one movie was really good or this one show is good. But overall, I don't know.
Well, I think it is partially fatigue. But I think and I think what exacerbates that fatigue is when the stories aren't as compelling.
Unquestionably.
Unquestionably. So it's like, okay, I already don't want to kind of like, oh, great, another superhero movie I got to see. Geez, all right. But, it's probably going to be good. And then you get there and you're let down. Then you can do it again. You're let down again. And it's like, okay. So I'm not even getting anything good out of this. At least...
Right.
If I had to go see it, it's like, okay, at least it'll be, that was cool.
Yeah, because in order to sustain, sustaining these properties, man, you got to keep coming up with story, because ultimately the trap is, and you see this happening now, people are just like, well, you know what? My Star Wars is the prequels and the original trilogy or something. Like, you just get people that just tune out completely to everything new, and when they feel like Star Wars, they just pop in the stuff they actually liked. That's not gonna, the toy sales and all that are down. I mean, everything's down. Now, this comment is interesting because it's only if one key thing happens. David says, if he does the Star Wars what he did to Iron Man, he'll fix Star Wars. Iron Man was amazing. The problem is Iron Man was done by Favreau, not Filoni. Filoni is the one who actually has this promotion. Now, and what I meant by the whole key point or whatever is that obviously if Filoni is elevated to this chief creative officer, he's obviously going to pull Favreau up with him. And so it could end up having that net effect. Yeah, right. Let's see. Ronaldo's got a couple. And then we can start getting into some of this other stuff we're trying to talk about. He says, at the end of the day, I think Dave is a very open-minded creator and will allow fresh new takes to the franchise. Still, that's my concern. I'm good with the overall decision. And now he has a question. He says, let me ask this. You think he'll be okay with stuff like Andor, which is not faster, more intense type philosophy? Do you think he likes Andor? I mean, we sort of answered this question a little bit earlier, but yeah, I honestly do. I think he likes Andor, although I actually haven't read anything about it. Like, I haven't actually read anything in the print that says, yes, I love Andor, but, spiritually speaking, I think he does.
Yeah, I think he probably enjoys it just because once again it's all in his wheelhouse and it's all in the backyard and it sets up things and the only thing is just I think it's fresh enough because it speaks to different types of Star Wars fans. For people who aren't into the lightsaber stuff and mystical power or the Force, it's when you want something more grounded, like I said, like a Rogue One, like that appealed to a lot of people because it didn't have all of the typical things that you would normally see, except for the couple of scenes you had with Vader. I mean, it was pretty much, just a war film, just as taking place in another galaxy or whatnot. It's no different than if you watched Battlestar Galactica or Star Trek or whatever, and I think and Eric, you brought this up on numerous occasions where, when you could create Star Wars for different groups, like you said, like a drama or like a political thriller or something like that, which Andor kind of is in a way. But if you did something more like we talk about Bloodline, the book Bloodline, phenomenal book. And if you could turn that into a movie, because essentially the premise of it is like, okay, the empire's been destroyed, and now you're trying to build this new republic. Leia's trying to be at the forefront of it, but then everybody kind of finds out the big secret that, oh, that guy who was like terrorizing and blowing up our planets, yeah, that's her dad. So it's just like now she's got to try to contend with that, political blowback on her, and while she's trying to establish. So if you're into political thrillers or things that's dealing with almost like a West Wing or some of the political drama that you would see on a show like 24, where you have, people in the back channels kind of talking, trying to set up different people or trying to like that
Jack
type of
Ryan
stuff.
Or
Jack
any
Ryan,
of the Tom Clancy stuff. Actually, I think that was,
yeah.
but
yeah, so stuff like that, like you can do that in Star Wars, and it will be great, and that would appeal to a whole different group of fans. And then for those who still love the, swashbuckling, let me lift rocks and move them across, and little green people talk, like you can still do that in the films, and I won't say everyone's happy because someone's always going to be unhappy, but by and large, you're sufficing the appetites of a lot of different people's taste buds.
Well, even though he couldn't join us on the show, he does join us in the chats. Good old Dave Kazi says, I think Filoni will maintain the amazing storytelling that we've come to love with Star Wars. And I mean, look, I agree with that. First of all, it's good to have you, at least watching us tonight, Dave. I mean, I gotta say, like, one of the reasons why I look forward to our yearly Thanksgiving special that we do the night before Thanksgiving, which, by the way, if you didn't get a chance to see it, check it out. It's on the channel. In spite of some of the copyright issues we had, they're all resolved. It's all good. You can watch it. And then, hey, I mean, while I'm promoting stuff, right, hit that like button, because it does help the algorithm out. And it's always nice when you guys are watching live and you hit the like button. It's really good. But yeah, I agree with Dave. I think, look, there's a very good chance that from the storytelling part, I don't really think there's going to be a problem. I think that Filoni's ability to continue to tell compelling stories. Now, again, it wasn't even so much the story in Ahsoka, because we did bring up Ahsoka. We said, look, Ahsoka was kind of a mild disaster. I mean, And again, you can also watch our entire review of every episode of Ahsoka if you missed any of that, and you can get all the details. But I think that from a storytelling perspective, Ahsoka wasn't bad. Once again, if there's a continuing theme with the failure of Star Wars, it's always the execution, except for the animated shows. By and large, the animated shows are fine, but that's because that's Filoni's bread and butter.
So let me ask. And I'm glad you brought this up, because here's my other problem, and this is, I guess, goes back to your original question you asked me on the at the top of the show. My problem with some things I'm concerned about is that, like, okay, Filoni is, as much as we praise Filoni for knowing, Star Wars almost better than anybody in the sense of the higher ups at Lucasfilm thus far.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just Ahsoka though, because the Book of Boba Fett was terrible, and then you had season 3 of Mandalorian, which once again you're over that. So it's kind of like, once again, like, and I think that's why I say, like, I'm excited for Filoni in a way, but I'm, like I said on the last episode, I'm a bit leery, just because I haven't seen as much consistency across the board as I would have liked. He started off with a great run with Mandalorian season 1 and 2, and then there's a couple episodes like that, Mandalorian 2.5 episode that he had in Book of Boba Fett, that was phenomenal. But outside of that, the Book of Boba Fett, we spent half the time watching him float around in his bacta tank, having, nightmares or visions of, yesterday's past. And then you make him not really be this, feared guy, but now he's all trying to be. I mean, and it's cool that if you're trying to take Boba Fett in a different way, but it's like you almost dumbed him down or wimped him out too much.
Yeah, they neutered him.
And it was just, yeah, exactly. And so it was just like, all right, well, this is not the Boba Fett that, we're thinking that is chasing after Han Solo. I mean, he doesn't seem like the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy.
You know what's funny?
Not watching this. Yeah.
No, well, here's what's funny. And that's so... What I find hilarious, he was more Boba Fett when he was in The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, remember that scene where he just took out all those stormtroopers and he was brutal? He was beating them down with, hand-to-hand combat. So, yeah. I mean, he was just, that was just incredible. That's the Boba Fett. Even how ominous he was when he was talking to Bo-Katan and the other bounty hunters or, Mandalorians that were in that bar or whatever. And he was kind of menacing a little bit. I mean, there was so much about the Boba Fett character that was true to form, true to that character, that was done in The Mandalorian. And we were so pumped because we were going to get a series. And then it's like, well, what's this? He's like this like big teddy bear guy. And, nobody's listening to him. He's trying to like clean up this town with like 3 people. It's now if Boba Fett were who he actually is, he could do that. And don't get me wrong, and again, our reviews of that show are on here too, but there were things that we liked about it. But you're right. I mean, at best, it fell way below expectations. That's the kindest thing that we can say. So, absolutely.
Right. And then season Mandalorian didn't land as well as it. I mean, it wasn't Book of Boba Fett bad, but it wasn't, necessarily as good as season 2 of Mandalorian. So then essentially you have season 3 of Mandalorian. Not that great. It was okay. I'll just put it that way. It was okay. Book of Boba Fett, terrible. Ahsoka, not good. So that's 2 whole shows we can say in honorable mention that have come in succession. And it's not like you had something in between them. Like, okay, it's not like it was season 3, Mandalorian, then you had a great show after that. Let's say Andor he did, and then, followed by Book of Boba Fett, and then something else that was phenomenal, and then you had like you kind of have 3 L's kind of in a row there, and so that's concerning for a lot of Star Wars. And then now you're making him chief creative officer. It's almost kind of like, oh, we're going to give Rian Johnson the trilogy now. It's like after you created The Last Jedi, it's like, which
but in their
clearly
defense,
divided the fan base.
That's true. But in their defense, they actually gave him that before the thing came out. So, but again, the funny thing about that was they were obviously seeing what they saw and were liking it and said, this guy is really doing some good things. Let's give him a trilogy. I mean, they had to know the fans were going to have issues with this, unless they're out of touch with fans.
Well, it's not even the fans. I mean, when you got Mark Hamill telling you on Twitter,
right? It's true. Before it even
that
comes
was your
out.
First clue. Yeah, before it even comes out, he's like,
your first clue
guys.
Is Luke Skywalker is saying he wouldn't do any of this, right?
Yeah, especially like the guy who's been playing him since 1977.
We better be careful because I think, in thinking about this, Ronaldo might get upset. Because you know how he loves The Last Jedi.
I know, and I have a special. Look, Ronaldo's our guy, and we're never going to change up on him.
Well,
but
not only that, but he knows
true.
How we feel. Sure, but and again, in our defense, we never said that we hated the movie. Like, we like The Last Jedi. There's a lot of things to like about The Last Jedi. The only difference is
the execution of it.
There are some issues. Yeah, there are some issues. Oh wait, okay, hold on. I got to get this one from Ronaldo, and then I got to get this new. He says, we'll see the effects of meaning Filoni's decisions like 2 or 3 years from now. And then, as I anticipated, hey, Dave. Rian Johnson made a great film. All right. Now, Dragonfly basically says, I think Rebels was his best work so far, and I'd like to see him get back to those roots, which he was trying to do with, Ahsoka, which is essentially Rebels Season 5. But you're right.
Well, let's just even go to Bad Batch. Bad Batch is a show that we didn't think we ever needed, but it's actually kind of a phenomenal show because it really shows you what's going on around the galaxy, like during this time period where there's this whole switch. We're starting to see, and it's answering and filling in some gaps with the whole Stormtrooper program coming in when they, phasing out all the clone troopers, the whole switch, the whole chip thing in their heads. Just how all that's work. And it's like, okay, like these are really cool, compelling stories. You got Omega, who's basically the sister of Boba Fett, and that's why she has this great ability for strategy. Like, once again, like Dragonfly just mentioned, like in the animation world, he's knocking it out the park. It's like in that, he's done no wrong, in my opinion. None. Like,
well,
and that's
right, but that's because he knows anime. Again, you just hit the nail on the head, right? The stories were good. The stories were good in his live action shows, but his execution sucks because he's not a live action guy yet. I want to stress that. I do think he's going to get there.
I think the story about Book of Boba Fett was stupid, though.
Well, I mean, but if you actually just say it on paper, right? If you just say, look, he gets out of the Sarlacc pit, he is trying to, clean up this town, and at the same time, he's dealing with his past when, he was kidnapped and then brought back to health and then became part of this Tusken Raider tribe. And then, I mean, if you actually just say it, you'd be kind of like, all right, yeah, I'd be up for this. Because if it was handled differently, you know what I mean?
But see, that's what I'm saying. Like, so, and to your point, yes, that's true. When you talking about,
it's like Deadly Assassin, but you know what? Tamira Morrison's just going to play him cuddly. No, I mean, and then the whole, and it's true they had to write that whole stupid, like, kitchen chase scene with that mouse droid or whatever that was. Oh, yeah, dude.
And when Fennec Shand is more, when Fennec Shand is more gangster than you, it's just like, but once again, it goes back to that whole woke agenda. Like, oh, great. Now we have to have
strong women, weak men. Yep.
Exactly.
They
And
have
it's
to,
just like, well,
emasculate the
emasculate
men
the
and
man.
then
Yep.
promote the women.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest issue. And yeah, that's what it comes down to. Oh, and then you had that one scene too with the whole like Back to the Future looking kids on those scooter
Oh
things or whatever.
yeah.
It's like, dude, that's like they just beamed in from another film.
Yeah.
That looks so
That
out of
was
place.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was crazy. All right, let's see what we got here. No, a little bit of a support thing. Dragonfly's like, I got your back, Ronaldo. I like it too. It's top 5 for me. Actually, like I said, it sounds so hypocritical with this, but The Last Jedi actually does rank pretty high in my list of films. Because again, if you take it as a movie and not a Star Wars movie, it's actually pretty good as a movie.
Well, I even think even as a Star Wars movie, I think it's good. I just think that
Yeah, but it took us like 3 miles on the way home to like process to even. I
well,
still crack
this is
up at
what
that. We did not say a word. We walked out of the theater, didn't say a word. Got in the car, didn't say a word. I mean, we didn't even talk about anything.
anything. Yeah,
Like it
was just
wasn't like
dead
we were
silent.
avoiding Star Wars or anything. We just didn't say a word. Driving the car, like down. It was at least 2 or 3 miles before one of us. I don't even remember which one. It's like we were just
It was
sheepishly
me.
going.
I
So,
was like, so
what'd you think?
yeah, yeah. I remember I asked you. I was like, so,
And never
the
in the
movies?
history of a Star Wars
Yeah,
film has that
as many
ever
of
been the
movies.
case.
Yeah, as many times we've gone to the movies, especially see Star Wars together. It's just like,
Yeah.
when we came out of Rogue One, man, we couldn't that
Oh, we
was
couldn't
like,
shut up. We were like
and
a bunch
we
of.
saw it like 8 times. Yeah, and I only saw Last Jedi like maybe twice in the theater, and I was just like, okay,
Yeah, I might have seen
yeah.
it. I might have seen it 3 times. But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. And a lot of it was because it was so weighty. We had to actually process the film. It's like, what did I just see?
But and I think if they would have, um, I think if they would have split part of that up, maybe like okay, maybe if you have grumpy Luke, but then like in the Rise of Skywalker or something, like we get more of his return to form. Like okay, Luke is back and he's and he helps Ray, deal with the Emperor and whatnot. Like if Ray had to contend with Kylo and then Luke came back and finished off Palpatine, to me that would have been better.
Yeah.
And it would have been more believable and more applicable in my opinion. Because since they had this whole dyad in the Force, it would make sense that Rey would help redeem Kylo, especially since she had a close relationship with Han and blah 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 blah. And then now Luke can actually like, okay, I thought my father's finished you, but you know what? I'm going to finish you now. And that's like, okay. And maybe in that whole battle, Luke, they both die or something like that. And now it leaves Rey to ascend to be the next,
What was the
whatever.
line? It's a line I think he said to Kylo. It's like, yeah, I've been killed by a Skywalker before, or something like that. I can't remember the line. Where he said some like snippy little thing that was a reference to when Vader threw him down the shaft.
Yeah.
I thought that was actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. Now, Dave says, I know the 3 of us haven't talked at length about Ahsoka, but I think there was more of an exploration of imagery and ideas he started in Rebels, but the dialogue fell a little short. Yeah, there's a lot of problems with Ahsoka, but the dialogue was definitely one of them, a primary
dialogue. And I think there weren't a lot of things that like one of the main things, and Dave, if you go back and watch some of our
yeah, I was gonna say, I'd
videos,
really
if you
be
haven't-
curious on your input if you have some time, because you could just listen. You don't have to watch it, but listen to our reviews. Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest things that the problems that we had was with Ahsoka. The show was called Ahsoka, yet we didn't learn a whole lot about her. So that was number one. The first couple of episodes was basically about Sabine, and the thing is like, listening to Filoni explain it, I kind of knew that's where he was trying to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't communicated or executed properly in the show, where it's more tangible, if you will. So I think the big part of it was Ahsoka had these feelings, and we didn't know why she felt the way that she felt. She was just really hard on Sabine. They had this whole despondent relationship. She walked away from her. We didn't know why, and it took us almost like to the end of the thing to even figure out even part of the reason why she walked away. And it wasn't until like, okay, we got to that one episode where Hayden Christensen shows up as an Anakin, and we start even then it was still left to our interpretation. Even Filoni just said it, like, yeah, I kind of wanted the fans to kind of interpret it how they want to. That's cool, but that's a problem too, because now you're not clearly saying like or defining the lines of something that's very pivotal. So it's the execution of Ahsoka wasn't the best, and when you have someone with the acting chops of Rosario Dawson, and we're not allowed to see that come out of her, was a big letdown.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things is if you ever want to play a really cool drinking game, every time Ahsoka crosses her arms, you'll be obliterated within the first 10 minutes. I mean, she's just crossing her arms constantly. It's like, Filoni, dude, have her do something else. Again, there's a myriad of things in Ahsoka that show Dave Filoni's complete inexperience when it comes to live action directing. He shows promise, but he's not there yet. It's almost like how, and what's funny is I've actually talked to some people who have defended Ahsoka. They're very few and far between. Most of the people see the problems. And again, I enjoyed it immensely, but I did see the problems, and it was, I mean, of course, it's exasperated by the fact that we have to review it every week. So, you're watching it through that different lens. Just still have yet to go back. Remember how I said at the end of the reviews, I was going to go back, watch it all in one shot again, and see, how I feel just completely watching it. But part of the problem is that it's sort of like what everybody criticizes about, and this is what I said. You guys all criticize Lucas, rightfully so, by having all these Oscar-nominated and sometimes winning actors in the prequels, and yet their performances are wooden, and you don't know how to direct actors. It's almost like, well, whatever. Oh, I don't know, just act. It's almost like my joke how I always said, hey, come on, man, coaching a football team, what is it? It's just like, take the ball and just run to the other side. What's the problem? That's basically what Filoni's doing as a director. I mean, a lot of that one scene where Ezra and Sabine are talking, when they're riding to that, trying to go across the plains or whatever. I mean, it sounded like they were reading off of a teleprompter. There was all kinds of bad decisions. He would start things out and not give us any explanations for them. And I mean, not everything was handled terribly, but there was enough where you're just like, okay, the show actually had a lot of promise. He's had some experience now. I'm having faith that season 2, should it come to pass, is going to be a lot better. But, I mean, Ronaldo says, buy one, rent one, burn one. Okay, Vision's holiday special Caravan of Courage. Well, that's going to be tough for you. I'm going to buy the holiday special because it's hilarious and it's just fun to watch. I'll rent Visions and I'm going to burn Caravan of Courage. I really did not like that at all.
I'm going to buy the holiday special because at least it's
to try to keep it from out of the hands of. That's like one less copy for everybody else.
and just because it's so rare. So like people like the holiday special. What's that? I can show it to them.
You want to
You
do
know,
to the holiday special what Palpatine did with the Jedi. I gotcha. Wipe them
right.
out of existence.
Rent one will be Caravan of Courage because I've never seen it. So and then of course
You're gonna
I want to
burn Visions,
burn
aren't you?
Visions. Yes.
You're just saying you want to burn Visions because you don't want to review it anymore. Hey, that's another thing. You guys can check. You want to really have some fun? Go back and watch our reviews of Visions, especially season 1, because it was basically. I think it was in the middle of like the 3rd episode or something. Where you're like, dude, do we really have to keep reviewing this?
Right.
But it's funny. You brought up the Bad Batch. We never finished reviewing season 2.
I know, right?
We like stopped at like episode 8 or something, and I have not seen, because I was trying to watch them as we were reviewing them. I haven't seen the rest of that season yet. So maybe maybe things slow down a little or whatever, or maybe we do that as a pre-record and we just knock them out or something. But we really should, in the interest of people that might be interested, completion. We should actually finish doing that. So
going back real quick to Kasi, we were talking about Ahsoka, and one of the and I know David, because he's watching, one of his standouts, his favorite characters, Balin, played by the late Ray Stevenson. Unfortunately, we always wonder, like, okay, well, what's going on with that? Well, Filoni actually addresses that. So I want to kind of put everywhere in case folks are wondering. So he basically, like, Balin's a seeker, someone who's wrestling with the memory of what was taught, and he has subsequent delusions that have set in. He's a person that survived the Clone Wars, that was trained in the waxing and waning days of the Jedi Knights, just like Anakin. He saw his order, his way of life fall apart, and he's basically deemed a failure. That way didn't work. So that's something that wasn't worth resurrecting, which is why he tells Shin, I didn't teach you to become a Jedi. I taught you to become something more. And as we kind of saw towards the end of season 1, he's standing on the statues of the father from the Clone Wars that we saw. The Clone Wars episode, we had the father, the daughter, and the son. So, of course, we know, unfortunately, Ray Stevenson did pass away. So we were kind of like wondering what's going to happen with that character. So he said, while Filoni isn't yet sure what will come of Balin Stevenson's absence, he acknowledges that the character's journey is not complete. Obviously, there's a story there. We're in a wait and see pattern at this point. But I'm glad the conversation is about Ray and how great he was. I used to have many debates with him saying, Ray, you're the villain, and he'll be like, no, I don't think so. So I was like, I know you don't think so, but you are. I love that you're playing it like you're not, which is exactly the way Balin thinks. And the character became one of the standouts of the series and a new fan favorite. So I think, once again, dealing with that particular character, I think that, of course, they're going to have to do something with that character. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to have to recast, because I think his part of his story is too pivotal for the next season of Ahsoka, especially since we still got Shin out here as well. You almost have to bring somebody in to play Balin. The question is going to be who.
Well, unless the other side of that is, unless they want to deal, now that Thrawn is back in our world and all that other stuff, they could actually wrap a lot of that, or at least do a chunk of that, in season 4 of The Mandalorian, and bring all that. Because remember, there's going to be a big movie bringing in Ahsoka, Boba Fett, Mandalorian, all that stuff, kind of like a little Avengers kind of thing going. So it's entirely possible that we can end up seeing some of that story, if not being tied up. It might continue in The Mandalorian season 4. And then at the end of that might open up something for Ahsoka season 2 that maybe Balin's not that necessary. And I mean, it would actually, I think, be worth it. I was thinking about this, that maybe we should do a show at some point relatively soon about should Balin be recast, or what should they do with him or whatever, because there's a lot of different things you can do, right? You can continue his story in the novels and the comics like they've done with a lot of characters, or you can recast him. I mean, as far as what the right thing to do is, that I think could actually make a really good discussion.
Yeah, true. I don't know. I mean, this whole Vanity Fair article, like I said, if you all want to check it out, please do. It has a whole, and I didn't, talk about everything, but I just kind of touched on some of the major points in the article that I felt like were prudent for this episode. But Dave Filoni has a task on his hands. That's what's for sure and without question. And we're all hoping that he's really up to it, and I don't know if he's going to be creating stories himself now, or if he's just more or less guiding and approving things. And that's what we're going to have to really see, is how far or what's the extent of his role as chief creative officer, because he could, there were talks about him having his own movie. Is that on hold now? There's been talks about, of course, other animated series to come out. Is he going to be actively involved in that, in the sense of actually writing the stories like he did for Clone Wars and Rebels? Or is he just more so going to be the facilitator? Is he going to pretty much like, hey, I'm going to give you, because that's another thing. Carrie Beck is the one who's supposed to be bringing in directors and different storytellers to do certain things. So that remains to be seen if they can really make all of this come together and really gel into one cohesive unit. And I hope that whatever description that Filoni's new job entails, I hope he does it, to the best of his ability, which I'm sure he will. I mean, he's of course a professional, but I just hope that we just get great content out of it. Don't cheap out on the fans. Don't go for the low hanging fruit. Really push the envelope, but in a smart, intelligent way. Take smart, educated risks, and you don't have to do it all in one whop. Sometimes you have to just incrementally start doing things and see how fans are responding to it. And then if you see they're responding to more of this, or add a little bit more of that. If you see they don't like this, okay, pull back a little bit. And I think eventually that's how we'll eventually get to the point where Star Wars can start to sustain itself and get back on the right path as a truly successful franchise.
That sounds like your final thoughts on it. But I mean, I'll say that, yes, he does need to, and not that he wouldn't take it seriously, but he really does need to think this thing through. I think that one of the problems that we as fans have is we don't really have all the information. We don't have all the variables that he does. So we have the results of the fruits of their labor, which, we to varying degrees like or find issues with. And then we're sitting here almost like armchair quarterbacks going, okay, well, I think you should do this. I think you should do that. And I sometimes wonder if we wouldn't think differently or have a different point of view sometimes if we were in on all these meetings, and I'm sure we would be contributing to them. I got a couple ideas, but Filoni does have an unenviable task of not just continuing the Star Wars franchise with really strong, compelling stories that enrich and expand this phenomenal universe that we've all spent 40 or 50 years now loving, but he has the extra weight now of actually righting the ship a little bit, He has to try to take some of the missteps that were done and try to swing those back and not necessarily pander to the fans, but stay a little bit truer to what Star Wars really is and what made it successful in the first place. And of course, this is one of the things that a new president would have to do, and that would be You have to stop trying to it. What Kathleen Kennedy has been doing is almost like when you try to make a video, make a viral video. Like, I'm going to create a video that's going to, get
Go
millions of
viral.
views or something and go viral. Exactly. All the videos that have gone viral have basically just been videos that were made and they just caught on for whatever reason. It's like writing a hit song. I mean, if there was a formula to write a hit song, which, I mean, there sort of is, like certain common elements. But I mean, if there was a formula, like, okay, all you got to do is A, B, C, and D and, kick it out, right? Everybody would be doing it. So now Filoni,
Mm-hmm.
his job is he's the chief creative officer, right? So what that means is that his part in all this is just, look, take each project, look at it, see what's going on, talk to the people that are creating it, find out what their goal is, use your knowledge of Star Wars to guide them and make sure that they're telling it in such a way that would not only honor Lucas's legacy, but also perhaps best tell the story they want to tell, staying true to the universe, but expand. And even just saying that is insane. I mean, think of everything you had to do. It's like a minefield.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like you, I think that this is a great opportunity for Filoni, certainly, but I think it's also a great opportunity for us fans. We have finally a person that's high enough up now where Filoni's not just probably the best creator that they have, but he actually gets to a large degree steer the ship. So, I mean, we'll just have to see. Only time is going to tell on this one.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, I just hope that the next couple iterations of Star Wars, we get Skeleton Crews coming up. That's the next one that we're going to see in live action, followed by, I believe, the Acolyte. So I don't know. We'll have to see where, I mean, Skeleton Crews pretty much done already at this
I
point.
was going to say, I don't know how much, even in some of the projects that are already slated for 24, I don't know how much really he can affect that. And that's another thing. That's a good point.
Yeah.
We can't, I mean, if Skeleton Crew sucks, we can't be like, nah, see, that Filoni is dropping the ball or whatever. It's like, well, no,
Right.
like you said, the thing is done.
Right.
I would say judge Filoni based on what starts coming out in maybe 25.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so now Ronaldo, we'll give him the final word. He says, time will tell, but I think he'll do a great gob. So he's going to hawk a giant loogie.
The Force Loogie.
Yeah, exactly. I know you mean job. It's fine. But that's the first thing that I thought of. I mean, I will say this. I was just kidding about that final word thing. I will say this. I think that if anybody Lucasfilm has a shot of turning everything around and making some good stuff, it's going to be Filoni.
Yeah, I never think. I think he needs to have the right people around him. He's got some incredible directors, and it's funny because, and maybe we'll talk about this at another time. But Taika Waititi's name is back on the forefront again with his Star Wars film.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so that's another conversation we're going to have pretty soon. So, like I said, we've got Deborah Chow, we've got Bryce Dallas Howard, we've got James Mangold, we've got some people who are going to be creating some stuff in the Star Wars universe with the assistance and the backing of Dave Filoni. So hopefully, those things really knock it out of the park for the franchise. Otherwise, I think we're in trouble.
Yep. Well, here's the thing. Maybe I'll put this in the comment section or something. This might be a good time to link back to who are their top, it was 5 or something, directors that we want to see make a Star Wars film. Because, like I said, this is going to be a new era that they're going to usher in. So what you have to do with Filoni is you have to surround him with the right people, but you also have to keep all the people that are going to be a hindrance out of his way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the key. That's the balance of power. Keep the people around him that are going to prop him up, that are going to help him, that are going to be beneficial to him, and then just stay out of his way. Don't micromanage him. Don't do any of that stuff. I mean, if anybody knows Star Wars over there, it's going to be him.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just have to see. But again, we hope you guys enjoyed this show. Let us know in the comments section. You still have maybe 20 seconds left to chat something in really quick. If you do, I'll pop it up. But let us know in the comments section if you think that Filoni is the right person. Do you think that this new title is maybe a name-only title? Or do you think that it's going to make a really great impact on the franchise? I'd really be interested. Both of us would be interested to know what you guys have to say. Again, the song that every YouTuber sings, right? If you haven't liked the video, please like this video. If you got anything out of it, if you want to see more content like this. If you have ideas for more content, you can always hit us up on our Discord. Of course, we have our social media. You can see that on the screen right now. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Reach out to us on social media. Give us some ideas on Discord if there's a topic you guys want us to cover. You can join our memberships. We have our Buy Me a Coffee link. You could throw us a couple of bucks if you want to help support us that way, or there's membership stuff. So, there's a variety of things, and we're going to keep trying to grow the channel from here. And it's helping because, we did have a lot more subscribers, so hopefully it's onward and upward, and we can grow this wonderful community that we have where we love to talk Star Wars with you guys. Friday. Do we know what we're talking about yet? Because we could do. Remember, we actually had the topic we were originally going to talk about, which is Boba Fett being possibly brought into The Mandalorian. So we could do that one, unless there's something else that comes up that we think is great. But either way, just watch. You guys will see if you subscribe and you hit the notification bell, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. Sometimes I don't think we know what we're talking about. Kazi is going to have the last word tonight. He says he'll have a good impact, but will take a little more time. Well, that's actually a really good final comment because, yeah, that's true. This guy's got an insurmountable task. You can't just expect him to get in there and, within a couple of days, everything's fine. So,
all right.
Again, let us know what you think in the comments, Discord, social media. Just post it somewhere. We'll find it. So until Friday, remember, 11 o'clock p.m. is our start time on Fridays. So once you guys are done doing everything you have to do, maybe you're working late, maybe you're shopping, maybe you're out partying, doing whatever, you can come back, unwind with us, and talk a little Star Wars. So until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.